Nebula? Oops. Let me turn that up. Hello, hello. Hey, Santana? Santana? Hello. Hello, hello, everyone. Let me get some stuff put together. Hey, Axelone. Hey, Dawn. Hey, Gabby. Can I be bothered to put up a notification on Twitter and Instagram? I don't know. Can I be bothered? Hello, hello. How have you guys been? Hope your guys' weeks have been alright. Peaceful. Hopefully. Potentially, maybe even alright. So close to graduating. You can make it. You can do it. Did I not? What did I save the last one as? Sort by date modified. How am I doing? I'm doing alright. This week was busy as usual, but it was okay. Not as bad as some other weeks, but twas slightly busy. Also the finals, just one more project left. You can do it. You can do it. I can't believe I started watching when I entered college now. Living, that is crazy. But I am very, very grateful that you stuck around for so long. Hey Murray! Currently in the thick of things at work. Yeah, no worries. I can't imagine it'll be that crazy. My streams never are that crazy. So you take care of stuff. And we will get started. What brush do I use today? Oh, this one turned on. Hopefully you had a decent weekend. My weekend was alright. Like, I don't remember what happened. So I can't imagine it was terrible. But I don't remember, to be honest. Gabrielle, hello. Artha. How have you been? It has been a while. I haven't really done much with any Utaites in a very long time. Renfair was 2 weekends ago? Last weekend? I forget. We forgot to take pictures. We were just like, it was so hot. We were so tired. Everything hurt. It was a mess. And then like when we left, I was like, damn it, we forgot to take pictures. Hope you've been doing well. I've been doing alright. I hope you've been doing well. Miss Peach? I heard a cat meow, but I don't see a cat. How's your D&D campaign going with your Owlin Bard? We haven't actually been able to play for a couple months now. Every weekend just ends up being super busy, which I guess is pretty common for D&D stuff. But last time we played, she got a scythe, like a legendary item from like a mini boss type fight, and then we fought another mini boss, and the result of that mini boss fight was she's currently debating, because we haven't yet done the next campaign day, but she's now currently debating whether or not she wants to go and be a warlock and make a patron, or like have her patron deity be the big bad of the campaign for the current like region that we're in. So I haven't really made the decision on that. I haven't decided like what her path is gonna be, but potentially she might make a pact with like, yeah, with the big bad, mainly because like originally she wanted her to be a barbarian, so she'd go and she would class into ancient spirit guardian, or whatever the kind of like tank-y but with spirits subclass that was, or path that was, and that was the original plan, but you know, then we had this very interesting development. I have always wanted to play warlock, so obviously I am like kind of jumping at the chance to be one. My first character I ever made was a warlock, even though I never actually played that campaign. But yeah, I don't know. That's true. It's like the same with, it's funny because I technically have like a kind of overarching lore thing going on with the environment of like the campaign we're in. So because I picked like the hermit background, there's something about the world that I am like innately familiar with, but we haven't like, it hasn't really culminated into anything just yet. And then Gary's character is like a, what is it, Hexblade Warlock type. So he's got his own like patron thing that the DM has to fucking weave in, and then I'm considering going into Warlock, so then there's that whole thing that has to get woven in. Actually, technically all of us are like low-key soft Warlocks, because even our cleric, which my friend Kino plays, he's also got like this big god thing that he has with his cleric kind of affiliation. So we're all we're all working with supernatural things, and our DM's just kind of like, alright, how do I weave all these things together? I'm currently playing a cleric in a different campaign, and the struggle of like, do I save my like lower level cleric, where it's like, do I save my spell slots for people's health and healing, or will I waste it on attack spells? You know? Cause my warlock is a gunslinger warlock. Or not warlock, sorry, cleric. Gunslinger cleric. And so she has like a gun and like a bunch of martial weapons. But she also has to heal people, which I'm never like thinking about. But it's alright. So far no one has been almost dead just yet. Yeah, so, I picked up healing in Final Fantasy XIV, and I feel the same thing, because in 14 at least, you know, there's the concept of, like, even if you're, like, a healer, you should still be doing damage, and, like, picking between someone's, you know, survival and my DPS is like the constant thing of, like, can I fit another Malefic before the tank dies, you know? And I've been dealing with that a lot since I've picked up doing healer. And I think that's gonna translate a lot into when I play my D&D character again, where it's like, do I shoot the guy? Or do I try to help my you know, my, like, other teammates survive this boss fight? You can ask me whatever you'd like. Generally, art questions are a lot more relevant to what I do, and I pretty much only do art, so, and I'm not a very interesting person outside of it, so I would generally recommend, if you have art questions, feel free to ask them here. There are certain questions where I'll probably be like, it kind of derails the stream just like a little bit, and so probably better to save that for maybe a different instance, but feel free to ask away, whatever you'd like. Hey, Spider! Some people just kind of, like, I've heard some people draw along while I'm streaming, but I think the vast majority of people just kind of put it on and then just still do whatever they want to do. Do I still draw in my sketchbook for studying or practice? Not lately, because a lot of my work is digital, and then when I'm not working, I don't really want to be drawing. So I just kind of tend to only draw digitally nowadays, although I would like to have an equal kind of spread between. Just haven't really felt like it lately. wanted to take you to get used to Photoshop. I'm trying it out on my own. I'm finding it difficult to use all the features. I've been using Photoshop for, honestly, for over 10 years. I think in order to get used to it took me, like, maybe three-ish, around there. Just, like, learning all of the different parts of it. Because honestly, you only really use a fraction of the amount of things that are in Photoshop normally. But then, you know, you learn small things like, oh, what are these filters and how do I use them, and like what's the best case scenario, like or what's the best like approach to accomplishing like X thing or whatever. All those things you learn slowly, I think, over time. As long as you know the basic stuff, like where is your brush settings and where are your canvas settings and how do you make it bigger, make it smaller, how do you use, or like all the specific tools in the toolbar of the brush, the transform tool, the select tool, the lasso tool, like all those kinds of things. Once you've kind of learned that, then it's just sort of getting a feel for like how do you best enjoy a program. For me, brushes matter quite a bit because it does affect how I feel when I'm drawing, and I'm a very like kind of, I don't know, baser instincts kind of an artist, where like if it doesn't feel right, it kind of affects like my approach to the drawing. So I put a lot of emphasis in like looking at different types of brushes and shopping around for them and like testing them all out and finding the ones that I like and like all that kind of stuff. So it took me a couple of years to get used to Photoshop, but it's been sort of a ongoing process of like really making this program feel like it fits me. And as a result, you know, it's like kind of hard for me to fully dedicate to a different program. I try a lot of programs for fun, and I think people should really do that. Like, if there's a new program that allows you to use a trial, like, you should definitely try out other art programs, just in case you might like it more. But I've only ever really felt like Photoshop was the one that had everything that I needed for work and then for personal stuff, all in one. So that is where I am with that. Is it hard for you to think of what you want to draw? Because I struggle with trying to think of something to draw all the time. I end up finding a rough that I like to try to come up with a character with that rough. Yeah, like I do struggle sometimes to figure out what I want to draw. Sometimes it helps if you keep a list of things that you think about when you can't draw. Like, I find that when I'm kind of forced to work on a project, or I'm not at home or something like that, I'll sometimes see something, or I'll think of something where I'm like, oh, I really want to like try drawing that or something like that. I'll write a list. I have a list on my phone that I sometimes refer to with project ideas, or even just things that I think would be cool to draw, an idea for a character. And, you know, not always are those ideas, like, good or interesting, and after you write them down, you might not want to try it, but, like, it's good to kind of have a working list, because you never know, like, when you kind of run out of ideas and you don't really think about all the things that you told yourself you wanted to try, but in the heat of the moment, like, you can't think of them. So that's helped me sometimes. I'll also just kind of look at other artists and see what they've been doing and see if that, like, makes me think of anything. Finding ref is also a pretty good way to approach it. I tend to be a lot more, I don't know, I don't look at, I guess, necessarily, like, directly going to photo reference and then, like, finding out an idea from there. I try as much as possible to, like, kind of culminate a bunch of different references in my head into, like, one idea, to come up with a concept from that, as opposed to just, like, going to one thing and then trying to make stuff. So I don't know, you could do, like, challenges, you could do like any of the bandwagon stuff that art communities tend to do, where, you know, they have, like, prompts and whatnot. There are a bunch of, like, different groups that do stuff like that, so I don't know, any of them can help. I think it's very normal to not have an idea what you want to draw. And there's no, like, right or wrong way to kind of approach fixing that. You kind of just have to keep in mind, like, things that you enjoy doing and work around also, like, trying to challenge yourself in your free time and learning new skills and stuff like that, but try to have fun when you can just kind of draw for yourself and you don't have to draw, like, something in particular, because it's very tiring drawing stuff for other people and drawing other people's ideas all the time. I mean, it's nice when you get the chance to sort of do whatever you want to do, regardless of how, like, elaborate it is. I don't know how big a volleyball is supposed to be. I like, a little bit bigger than that. I forget. What was this one? I have not, and I'm a little scared too, if I'm gonna be honest. how do you go about value studies and understanding it? So I guess it's a little vague. Value studies are very much like normal studies in that the point of it depends on what you're trying to learn. Right? Like if you're trying to learn value distribution in general, just like learning how to better control it in a more realistic way, then like taking a photo reference and turning it grayscale will help train you to see value as it correlates with form and lighting and how it moves across like an object. And you know, beyond like what you observe while you do a value study, what's important is that you start to really focus on understanding like sort of what it means for something to have a similar value or be of drastic different values, what it means within a composition for something to have a much higher contrast when it comes to a value range versus, you know, where do you put things, where do you put like a lower value range within a piece versus a higher range of values, and like what does that tell you, what does that say about this piece and how to use that to your advantage, right? Like all those things are ideally what you should kind of be grasping on top of the whatever value study you're doing, just for whatever reason you're doing it for, because that's like the kind of real purpose of using values and really paying attention to them, is how do you use them as a tool to drive a motif or a concept or a viewer's eye, or how do you make a good illustration, how do you do something and make something out of the base components of how we judge things, how we see and perceive color and light and all that kind of stuff. So the how is relatively standard, right? I imagine you understand what it means to do a study, but understanding value is more than just, I know that this gray goes here, and I know that this darker gray goes over here, and I know that this is because light comes from this way. It's understanding also that value indicates a kind of shifting of planes, of where light hits kind of directly on the surface of a plane is kind of indicating to you the angle of all of these light rays, and how does that change depending on the sculpt and the form of something like a face, and how do you communicate 3D form, 3D depth through a variety of different shades, right? It's all correlated with each other, which is why understanding it is kind of like a pretty vague, like open-ended thing. I don't exactly know what you're trying to learn from it, but there's a lot with it. There's a lot of stuff with understanding value, with learning about it, that kind of goes beyond just like, hey, how do I even do a value study? So ultimately it'll depend on what you're trying to learn. I have a question. Are you using a drawing tablet with display or no display? Because I always had a hard time doing line art with my drawing tablet, so I do line art on my iPad instead. Is it a bad thing that I can't do line art with a normal drawing tablet? No. I think it's very valid that you do better with line art with like a display tablet or an iPad. I would be inclined to agree that yes, I think it does help if you use one to do line art. I used to use like a non-display tablet. Now I use a Cintiq. Cintiqs make me a lot more of a perfectionist, which is not necessarily something I think is good, but I will say that my line quality has gotten a lot better since I've started using a Cintiq. Overall, though, it is possible to learn how to draw and like make pretty good line art with just a non-display tablet, but it does take a lot of getting used to, right? Your brain still has to understand that disconnect between the fact that you're looking straight ahead at a display, like a monitor or like a computer screen, and you're not tracking what your hand is doing. So it's definitely a new thing to learn, and I'd say it gets better the more and the longer that you've done it. But if it's not something you're currently comfortable with, there's no reason to not use your iPad for that kind of stuff, and then just move it over when you end up wanting to color it and you prefer to do that on your computer or something like that. All is good. It makes sense. It's not crazy. I think it's quite normal for that to be the case. But I've done all my art both with a display tablet and without, and it's fine. Also hydrate. I guess it's when someone says learning values will help with painting. I mean, yeah. Is it that you don't understand like what that means, or is it? I don't know. Is there something deeper to that? Because, like, I'd say yes, that is, like, an objectively correct statement. Rest your feet, Tojo. Do you have, like, good, like, walking shoes or standing shoes, I guess? Because if you don't, you should definitely get some. What do volleyballs even look like? I have no idea. Hey, I'm just gonna make this pattern up because I have no clue. Vitsu. Thank you very much. How's Peach? Peach is doing good. She is, just vibing. She is straight vibing. And sleeping on my pillow. If you would like a picture of her looking very round. Here's a picture of her. She is getting more and more round. I think she's gained back all the weight that she lost. Not all of it, but like most of it. I think she's at least like 14, 15 pounds at this point, which is like, I thought we were in a good spot, but I think she's been eating too much. So, yeah. But she's doing fine otherwise. Is studying animals hard besides change to escape from reality into financial or you mean technical? I think animals are definitely difficult, but like humans are also difficult, so it's a little bit I think evened out. It's a different, whole new different system to learn, right? There's a lot of similarities between animals and human anatomy, but at the same time, there's quite a bit of new information, like the proportion and balance of animals are very different from human bodies, and so for someone like me, very difficult to get into animals. Not terribly different, but a new system entirely. So people who are really good at drawing animals, I think really thrive with dealing with like specifically the rhythms and the forms of any kind of animal, because a lot of them share a lot of very similar characteristics. Going from drawing animals and humans, kind of still very different stuff. So personally for me, pretty difficult. What is the best way of learning how to draw hands for imagination? Best way to learn anything, or learn how to draw anything for imagination, is to understand the basic building blocks, right? Like, I am a big proponent of, like, at least in my kind of personal philosophy, I don't think you should necessarily be teaching people how to draw specific things in specific poses in specific ways. I think people should be given the tools to basically problem solve what it would be what you would have to do in order to draw something. And that means knowing the basic building blocks of human anatomy, knowing like how are fingers segmented, how do the bones work, what's like the general shape and kind of base musculature if you want to. I don't necessarily think it's like super important for hands, but there is some level of like form factor with how to draw hands, and like knowing all of those things before you even start to think about like going about drawing them for imagination, I think is really important, because it matters less that you know how to draw the hand that you see in a photo reference. I think it's far more important when you're drawing for imagination to be able to craft these poses from scratch. You should know like the limits of how fingers bend. You should know like the base rules for how hands work. The fact that there's the palm very rarely does any kind of individual movement on its own, but the muscles on the palms do kind of slightly change depending on how the fingers are laid, the kind of how far and wide fingers can spread, the general length of each finger, how to mold the silhouette of fingers. Like, those are base tools, and learning how to pose them is very similar to learning how to pose humans, right? You understand the basics of like an arm cannot go a certain direction, but it has a certain degree of movement. Same with the waist and the torso and like the legs, and all the limbs have very specific range of movement, and depending on the pose that you give the body, it gives you a different emotion, or it gives you a different kind of feeling or different movement, and the weight changes and how that affects like the visual impact of something. And then being able to do that independently of using a model or a photo, it's the same stuff, right? So I'd say, how do you get to a point of being able to draw hands from imagination? You should focus more on learning and figuring out what tools are you missing that prevents you from drawing them from imagination, right? Do you actually not really understand how the anatomy of hands work? Even though you have hands, right, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are familiar with the structure of them. When people draw hands, they kind of draw like little noodles in the beginning, but it's important to realize that there are bones within the hand and the palms and everything like that. And so fingers are segmented into 3, usually across the board, so giving them each individual segments, and how do you translate that into giving it, you know, a rhythm and a flow and all those kinds of things, but still maintaining the structural integrity of it. It's not a big leap to go from that to then just posing them on your own, because then you start to understand, like, okay, well, when I give the hands like a very specific kind of tension to them, it makes it feel like they're clenched, it makes it feel like there's like energy building up behind it, versus using certain rhythms and certain poses will make it feel a lot more like loose and a lot more relaxed. Like, that's kind of all there is to it, but ultimately it's not that simple, right? You still have to understand basic building blocks of form and 3D, depth and space, and posing also has something to do with it. So to start, I'd say try drawing some hands from imagination, and then compare it with photographs or examples of other people and how they draw hands, and see like what's the difference between the two, right? What is missing from your depictions of it versus their depictions of it, and evaluate whether or not this is a structural issue, whether or not you just don't understand the anatomy of hands, whether it's a lot more of a kind of just like lack of technical understanding, if you just haven't done enough studies of hands to really understand like what they're meant to look like, I guess, or what the pose is supposed to convey, whether or not you're missing markers of like tension or markers of emotion, which will help make hands feel a lot more expressive and a lot more individual, or if it's you lack structural knowledge in terms of being able to draw things with 3D forms, okay, well then you should break down the hand into base parts like cylinders and cubes and whatnot. If it's just a matter of, I don't really know if I can like pose things in my head, then that's more of a like visual library sort of a problem. You probably haven't done a ton of different hand studies or experienced trying to draw a bunch of different types of hands, poses, like all those types of things. And so that's just a base, like, I should go out and just challenge myself to draw more types of hands, more types of, like, different, like, gender kind of will affect, like, the kind of, like, look and feel of how elements of the hand will show, like, certain people have a lot more veins popping through the top of their skin. Age will change it. You might have liver spots, or you might have like super bony knuckles, or you might have actually really kind of soft looking, slightly chubbier looking fingers. Like all those things will change the vibe of the hand, and all of them impact in ways like the efficacy of a pose. And so there's a bunch of different reasons for why you might be struggling with drawing hands from imagination, but ultimately, like, if you have the basic building blocks and the basic tools to understand how they work and why, or even, like, how to approach drawing hands, the leap to drawing hands then from imagination is not the biggest leap. It's just refining your knowledge once you've had an example that you can see of your own work, of like, okay, drawing from imagination basically is just taking the training wheels off. And you're being just thrown out into the wild, and you have to kind of just figure out, like, what is it that you're missing? What knowledge is it that you don't have, that's not strong enough to support your internal, like, mind's eye vision of what this hand's pose should look like. So try just drawing from imagination, and then see from there what is it that you're missing. I thought she was supposed to be slimming down. Yeah, she was, and then she got slim, and then I guess I didn't do a good job of keeping her that way. 'Cause she's back to being a little chunker. How well of an understanding do you need of art fundamentals to get into art school? Depends on the school, right? Certain schools are very picky about who they let into their college. Certain schools don't care. There's a difference in philosophy of, like, do they want to have students that they can kind of point to and say this is a success case of, we took the student from a low level of knowledge to a much higher skill ceiling and a much higher level of knowledge. Other schools have kind of like a prestigious thing to them, so they'll prefer to only accept students that they think have a baseline understanding. I'd say to get into art school, I would generally recommend having a basic understanding of, like, how forms work, understanding, if you draw characters, basic human anatomy. That could be just as simple as, like, learning major muscles, but not any of the smaller ones, right? Knowing how to communicate basic ideas, such as a pose or an expression. Understanding 3D form, right? Being able to draw a cylinder, cubes in space and in different perspectives. Kind of starting understanding of, like, 3D depth, and if you get into painting and stuff like that, it's lighting. Knowing that if light shines from one direction, shadows will fall away from that direction, and that side of the face will be lit, or that side of the composition will be lit. You know, like, if you demonstrate that you've at least spent some time making art, doing art, having, like, a critical eye without college like teachers just being over your shoulder. Like, I think that in general is a like base starting place for college stuff. I would recommend looking at portfolios of people that have been accepted or portfolios of people that are leaving. See where that kind of gap is, and kind of place yourself somewhere on that scale of, do I think I can, either am I on par with or somewhere around the skill range of people that have typically been accepted to these schools. Because you have to understand there's like an outlier range of like, these people are pretty good and probably don't need to go to this school, or probably need or should be starting at like second or third level versus freshman, right? Versus people that definitely should start at freshman because they need foundational courses. They have foundational courses in the beginning of the school year for a reason, to catch all of the students that haven't had formal arts education and need to catch up a little bit to students that might have already had arts education or have been to some form of tutoring or have been learning to draw for a while before they got to college. So there's a big gamut that colleges can run, and I don't think that you should be too nervous about necessarily like not having had any education beforehand. You more so should be focused on figuring out what is the preference for that college. Whether or not that college has a minimum requirement for skill, or whether or not they're much more interested in like bringing in students that really need help or really want to get help. So that when you leave, you can kind of be a spokesperson for the quality of their education and their curriculum. The more prestigious a school, the more likely they'll be to have a barrier of entry in terms of skill. So those colleges you typically want to look out for. But I feel like most colleges, the skill floor is not actually as high as some people think it is. I think generally it's a pretty moderate level for today's standards. Like, I think a lot of people nowadays are way better than students who started out or went to art college like even 5-10 years ago. So more often than not, like, you're probably okay if you have spent any time at all prior to applying to college drawing in any capacity. I think being able to envision an object in three-dimensional space in your head is pretty important for drawing for imagination, because a lot of what you're doing while you're drawing is kind of problem solving for a lack of a lack of sketch, a lack of anything to help you and guide you. And so an intimate understanding of what is it that you're drawing, being able to turn it around in your head and understand like the structure of it and all that kind of stuff is immensely helpful. I don't think there's anyone would say that not knowing how to do that is not helpful, or knowing how to do that is not helpful in any circumstance with art, but especially for drawing for imagination, I think it is very crucial. Any advice for drawing clothes? I feel like it's the next step in my journey, but it's intimidating. I don't worry about making clothes look good. I'm still kind of learning how to make clothing look decent. It is very difficult. It's the most kind of technical part of organic drawing, quote unquote, as I like to call it, where, you know, it's not super technical like drawing a car or drawing like guns or mechs or whatever, but it is arguably the one thing that, or one of the few things, there's a lot of things, one of the things that really severely struggle, like, it is very obvious when you're struggling with it, because not having a lack of good knowledge, a lack of practice, a lack of like understanding for how clothes work or how folds and fabric work, different textures, different textile strengths and thread counts and like all those kinds of things, like that shows very clearly when you're drawing stuff like cloth, and it's a lot harder to hide that lack of knowledge, I think. Even stylized cloth, it's not easy to pretend that to understand something when you don't. So I'd say don't worry about making it look good. I think it's important that people, especially if you want to draw characters, that you have to dive into drawing clothes. But focus more on getting the big shapes in, right? Understand basic gravity. When something is lifted, anything that is not being supported by something like an arm is going to fall down, right? Like as gravity does, if the gravity pulls things. And so understanding that basic physics of like, if something's not being supported, it'll fall, it'll drape. If you wrap something around, it'll overlap with other things, so it's going to create extra thickness depending on if it's overlapping on an arm or another piece of cloth or whatever. Basic things of like, if something is draping over a complex object, you can see that object through the fabric if it's thin enough or it has enough layers or whatever. Those are basic things that you have to understand with cloth. Once you get there, then you can start looking at, okay, how do wrinkles come about? Like, why are they there? You have to think about, okay, tension being like a major thing with fabric, knowing that when something is pulled or tensed, or has some form of tension on it, where that tension point originates from, what's being pulled, what's being draped, what's being like held up, suspended, sewn together, like those will impact where wrinkles come from, what do they look like, the fabric will impact what they look like, where they come from. Different types of clothes, how they're sewn, how they're fitted to the body, how the patterns are cut will change what it looks like when they bend, when they fold, when they're bunched up. So you get to that point after you've already started the whole process of just like drawing basic clothes, right? So don't be too worried about making it look super good. Just get into it. Draw different types of outfits, draw different types of ensembles, give them different, like, approach giving them different types of textures, like ruffles, lace, giving cuffs to shirts or collars and stuff like that. And then once you've gotten to that point, then you can start getting into the nitty-gritty and the technical stuff of, hey, physics and fabric and like, all these things are affecting this object. I have to learn what that means, right? For every instance and case scenario. So it's a long process. Don't worry about getting into it too deep when you first start. Just, you know, try getting into it for a little bit first before you get too worried about all of the more complicated things. Pet Peach? I will pet Peach. What's the canvas size? I draw on 11 by 17 inches at 300 dpi minimum. Miss Peach, I have been asked to give you pets. Miss Peach. She's shrimping. She's shrimping on my bed. But she thanks you. She gave me a lick. I'm gonna skip that. Check Discord. Oh, are you doing a food commercial or something? That's pretty cool. I bet those pieces of bread are stale as hell. Do certain poses just not work? Sometimes I get stuck trying to do one pose sometimes, and I'd like to know how you go about solving that problem. It happens, right? Like, you pick a pose and it's just not working out. I think more often than not, small things will be the real killer for a pose, right? It's having the shoulders too high, it's picking like an awkward angle for the arm, or having it be a little too far apart, or you know, like things that you don't necessarily think are major but they can definitely kill a pose or make you second guess like the choice that you made about it. So yeah, like it happens. I think being willing to know when you can fix something and knowing when you should just cut your losses and try a different pose is definitely something to develop, because sometimes it's just not worth it. It's not worth trying to make it work when it really, really doesn't. I don't know about CalArts. I don't know anything about ResD, but I feel like CalArts is pretty competitive. I wish I could stream more too. Unfortunately, I'm usually working overtime, so not a ton of time to stream, unfortunately. Solas, thank you for the tier 1 sub for 11 months. Any tips on digital painting? Depends on what you want tips on, I guess. Like, there's a difference between, you know, weird niche tip that only comes up like once in a while, depending on what you're painting, versus like, explain to me how to do the thing, which I don't know if I can. So energetic. Yeah, I'm feeling less tired than I have been the past couple of weeks, so. Maybe the music is a little too loud. I'll turn that up a little bit. I never know when these songs are going to be super loud or super soft. That's good. I've heard that, like, when you are doing like a food photo shoot, oftentimes the food is like super stale because it's been like sitting out and waiting for like the camera to be on. But good to know that they're fresh. They look really yummy. Well, there's a lot to painting, right? Obviously, there's like a deep well to painting. But if you really want to just like think about the basics of it, painting is just taking two separate colors, right? You're just taking two separate colors, and then you're going in, and you're just making them blend together. That is essentially what painting is. And that's like pretty much all you're ever doing, right? But obviously there's a lot of stuff like technique and when to use certain, you know, types of brush strokes or even the quality of brush strokes. How does like texture and stuff like interact with that? Obviously there's a lot to it. But if you're really getting into it, if you typically do cell shading of any kind, all you have to do is blend the edges a little bit to some of them, to some of the edges, and you've essentially started the process of painting. Obviously, it's really good to know the difference between form shadows and cast shadows, right? Form shadows being the shadow of something turning in space or turning away from light or being, you know, at a different angle from the light, versus cast shadows, which are casted by objects. Form shadows typically can softly fade or gradiate away when it's getting further and further away from like where the light is hitting, versus cast shadows are often much sharper. That's why some people talk about edge control, learning when to really gradiate or soften an edge versus when to keep an edge like sharp and clean will instantly increase like the quality of your painting or your shadows and whatnot. But that's all you're really doing, right? It's picking and deciding what it means for something to be, you know, like in shadow, slightly more like softly shadowed versus like hard cast shadow. And then beyond that, it's the in-between as well. It's not just highlight and shadow, it's also the in-between of, okay, well, these forms are not necessarily like turned away from the light, but they are definitely turned away more so than like the direct highlight. Okay, so then at that point you need to figure out what values describe the degree by which it's turned away from the light. Is it, you know, lighter or darker than the shadows around them? Or is it lighter or darker than the forms around them? Learning how to translate 3D form from 2D to 3D through basically putting different shades and tints of colors or even value next to each other to create that illusion. That's all painting really is. And so, you know, when I started painting, I was just putting down like different values and tints, and then I just like blurred the edges using like a, you know, like a hard opacity tool, and that was basically it. That's kind of what it is. And then as you start getting into it, then you start recognizing like, okay, well, you know, when you have two different objects that are interacting with each other, certain things happen in regards to like shadows and like kind of like ambient occlusion, stuff like that, and then you start getting a sense for, okay, well, in this instance I'm not going to use you know, anything too drastic because this is sort of an area that's not very you know, noticeable. It's not in the kind of region of focus that I want it to be, so I'm going to paint it less. I'm not going to like overdo it. It's going to be a lot more gestural. Texture is very much something that grabs someone's attention, and so you can reserve using texture for very specific areas, like all that kind of stuff. You learn and grasp eventually, and then once you start looking at other painters and seeing how they choose value, how they choose colors, you recognize that, okay, well, learning and using value to your advantage is really important, especially when you're drawing things either in light or somewhat lit. faces and skin and environments are not made up of just one local value, which is how you usually start, right? You base color something, but there's often a ton of different shades within that base color, quote unquote. And so learning to paint also means learning to paint with multiple colors, how to use saturation, desaturation to your advantage, how to place shadows in ways that is not too distracting, how to manipulate contrast so that you're not always using 100% light and 100% dark everywhere. You're focusing where that shadow should be so that it increases contrast around areas of focus and decreases the levels of contrast around areas of not focus, right? That's when things get complicated with painting. But when you're just starting out, it's really not that terribly different from what people tend to be doing already with, like, you know, doing, what is it called? Cell shading. If you do any kind of cell shading, you've already kind of gotten there to a certain degree. Best thing that's happening this week, minus news of Hunter x Hunter return. Best thing. I mean, I was pretty happy with, like, how my current assignment at work turned out. Yeah, I'd say that's probably the best thing that's happened to me this week. I mean, I don't know. I live very simply. If nothing terrible happens, the week was fine. Like, Peach didn't get mad at me. I got pho and boba on, like, Thursday. I don't know. I think this week was pretty average. Nothing crazy happened. Can I transform this, please? No. Why not? Oops. I'm being gaslit. I don't know why I can't transform it. What the heck? Why is it grayed out? I'm being gaslit for sure. No, this layer is just for the ball. I have no idea why the transform tool would be grayed out in this instance. I wonder if this is a GPU thing, actually. The layer is not locked. What do you mean I can't use one of my biggest crushes, which is the transform tool? What do you mean I can't cheat my way out of this? Well, I don't know. Alright, I'll just fucking redraw this hand, I guess. Yeah, it does. I think I'll probably have to do that in a second. But I'll do that later. After this. restart Photoshop real quick. It's a bug apparently, which I've never had, so it's very interesting. But I'm gonna restart Photoshop, and we will see if it continues to happen. Did I? I'll check. Does it go down the sleeve? None of these pictures have... Oh. Thank you, thank you. Well, he actually does have... Am I keeping you there or something? And one last one. What brush am I using? I'm using a, I don't know, what is this? I think it's the default brushes that come with Photoshop. It's the Kyle Ultimate Charcoal Pencil, I think. So Cole, thank you for the tier 1 sub for 18 months. Or over a year. We've been over a year, but I appreciate it nonetheless. you. Hope your night's going well too. Any comic book manga recommendations? I haven't really read any recently, but I'd say probably I mean my favorites are obviously like Hunter x Hunter, Fullmetal Alchemist, Toyo Megatari, which is a bride story which had Atelier, which is something I've mentioned before. I like D. Grayman in the past. Silver Spoon if you liked the author of Fullmetal Alchemist. But I guess it kind of depends on what you're looking for. glad you can make it. Which Photoshop version am I using? I think this is 2020. I don't think it's 2021. Maybe it is. I know. I need to draw a girl in the next one, or else I'm gonna just combust. This injustice. Forcing me to draw men. I think I'm okay. I'll probably end at 10 again. Just because, like a couple hours to get some stuff done before I go to bed early. Any tips on making more natural looking poses versus energetic and action poses? Typically with relaxed poses, you want to do things like slope the shoulders down a little bit more than maybe you might typically draw it. Maybe have them hunch a little bit more. Things like fingers and arms naturally slightly curl. They don't just like completely like hang straight. Whenever people stand, they tend to favor one foot over the other. They put their weight not necessarily right in the middle, but they'll kind of lean in one way or the other. With action poses, like kind of the opposite, right? You're always looking to push a pose through motion, right? So it's always point A to point B. What's going on in between those 2 points, and what pose do you pick between those 2 points as the most energy, the most action? So there's always momentum flowing through action poses, right? Or energetic poses. And stuff like raising the shoulders, clenching hands, or like really tensing up muscles will make it feel like they're getting ready to do something, right? There's also stuff like line of action will help you kind of keep a pose feeling like, you know, we don't, like, when you're doing something quickly or fast, quickly and fast are the same word. When you do something quickly or with a lot of like energy, and you're kind of like rushing through it, that in-between phase where you're getting from point A to point B again, like, you're not thinking about doing a bunch of different weird motions with your body. You're kind of focused on, like, I'm moving forward, or I'm jumping, or I'm doing something. So that's why energetic poses or action poses, especially in animation, tend to have a line of action, is because your whole body's going towards a goal. And so that whole, everything else has to work off of that main goal, as like secondary motion. So even though someone's like lunging forward, they might have like their arm, like, you know, ready to like throw a punch, and then the other one, like, what's the other hand doing? Well, it's kind of like bracing and doing like the opposite pose, but like how high and how far it reaches out is kind of like the flavor that you put into something. There's always like kind of a balance and a counterbalance, but with, especially with action or energetic poses, like, those tend to be a lot more kind of unbalanced, because again, you're getting ready to do something, or you're in the motions of doing something. If you're like kind of getting them ready to, like, you know, like fighting game stuff where they're getting ready to like do something, that's when you really focus on like getting them balanced, really grounded, right? The more grounded a pose is, the more prepared it seems like for them to start moving. This is the before the movement starts, right? And tensed everything, whether that be muscles, clenched fists, whether that means like super tight to the body poses, whether that means you know, like much more kind of like hunched, compact, like I guess arrangement of limbs and stuff like that. Again, raised shoulders, all that kind of stuff. Expression also helps too with poses. But yeah, you know, those are kind of like the general go-tos for those kinds of things. And then depending on the specifics of the pose that you do, all those things might change, shift a little bit, but that's generally how I think of it. Easiest way to make a pose look relaxed, though, is to drop the shoulders. A lot of people draw their shoulders too high, often because, as a lot of people like me, like, we raise our shoulders when we get tensed. Dropping the shoulders is the easiest way to make a pose look really relaxed. It also helps too, like, really feeling as if you're in the pose. You can do it, that's a way to live through it, but also, like, whenever you're figure drawing or even just drawing anything, really feeling as if you're doing the motion, feeling that tension literally in your muscles as you're drawing, you know, like this movement or whatnot, really helps make it feel real. For me, I always try to put myself in the shoes of, like, okay, well, you know, if they're like posed this way and then looking this way, like, does it feel weird? Does it feel uncomfortable? Like, there are times where I'll draw someone like turning their head and I'll be like, I think that's a little too far of a turn or too uncomfortable of a turn for this moment, because my neck will literally hurt. I'll feel uncomfortable drawing it because I can literally feel like the muscles in my neck trying to like mimic the tension. So it helps a lot, especially when you're trying to figure out if a pose is working or not, to really live through it a little bit. It feels kind of weird to do it in the beginning, but once you've tried it, it feels pretty natural. If you ever feel like your poses feel a little floaty, they don't feel grounded, that is something that can help, you know. It's a little bit abstract, but it does really genuinely help ground your poses when you feel the weight and you feel that kind of like pull towards like settling the weight of the figure lower in this kind of weird abstract way. It makes sense at some point, but maybe not necessarily in the beginning. Okay. This is kind of like an out of, like, not totally tangential topic. Or not tangential. It's a random topic. But, like, my friends have lately been playing this game where you guess, like, it's a website which plays the anime opening for, like, a couple seconds, and you have to guess what it is before a certain time limit. Or guess what anime it's from, right? And it could be, like, any season, and you have to be specific about which opening it is, I guess. And they've been playing that game, and I realized recently, I don't think I'm that big of an anime fan, because I can't place songs with animes, and even if I did, even if I know what anime it comes from, I don't necessarily automatically know the name. And then I'm like, do people normally, like, remember these things? Do people remember, like, even with songs that I save on, like, Spotify or something, I literally don't remember what the song sounds like if I just read the title. I have to listen to the song, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's that song. But that doesn't necessarily mean I know that I can name it, you know? And, like, especially, yeah, and exactly, like, especially with Annie song stuff, like, anime openings, like, I listen to those songs, like, independently of the anime. So, if I do like a song, I don't necessarily associate it with a specific anime, or rather, I never knew it was associated with a very specific anime. And lately I've just been like, did I actually ever care? Because I feel like maybe I should remember these things. I just don't. I can't do it. And the same with, like, I don't know, like, anything? Like, with manga, too, like, I could think of something, like a story, and I'm like, I know exactly, like, everything that happens, I know the plot, I know the characters, but I don't remember their name. I don't remember, like, the title of the thing, like, and if I do see the title, I don't necessarily associate that title with, like, the actual art. I have to actually see the art to know both the title and the and the fucking, I don't know. So, like, they play this game and I'm like, what the heck? Is this, like, just me? I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. Also, Cole, I was expecting a completely different opening. I did not know that Legend of Arslan had a different opening. I was expecting a completely different one. When I put that on my anime list, I was like, oh, I'll fucking know this opening. Like, this is this is so easy. And I didn't get it at all. None of the times that it came up. That was my fault. I apologize. But yeah, I don't know. Like, okay, for example, everyone got mad at me when I didn't recognize that the Iroh song when it came up on, like, song request. And I'm like, am I supposed to have remembered that? Like, I like Avatar: The Last Airbender. I've watched it many times. Am I supposed to have remembered that song? Like, it was a good scene. I don't necessarily associate that song with that scene, not mainly because I don't really remember the song at all. I've never, like, focused on the music more so than the scene. It's like, anytime, like, that comes up, people are like, oh, my favorite. I'm like, how do you know this song? Like, how do you know, what is it? What am I missing? What is it that I am missing where I just, like, literally can't imagine the associated context for things? Like, I don't know, is that just me? Am I crazy? Is this supposed to be, like, a normal thing that people can do? Like, if he sang it, I'd know. But if I just listened to the instrumental, which is what played on that one song request, I was like, I don't know what the song is. But everyone in chat was like, oh, this makes me so sad. Oh, I love Avatar: The Last Airbender. I was like, what? How do you guys remember these things? How is this possible? But I also accept that I have a really terrible memory. Okay, but, like, there's a difference between the singing part of it and then the instrumental part, you know? And it's, okay, also, he sings it once! In the whole show, he sings it once. And it's like, am I supposed to remember that moment out of like all the moments? Like, I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit more forgivable than like an anime opening that plays every single episode for an entire season. Like, I remember the moment. I remember Iroh having a moment. It was a great moment. I mean, it was a terrible moment, but it was a great moment. So it's like, I remember it. Do I associate it with song? Only if I hear his voice. Otherwise, there is no connection. I am more. I'll fucking get the Hunter x Hunter opening. Trust me, I love that song. But like, I just don't know. Like, is that normal? Like, when you're a fan of something, I thought I was a fan of a lot of these shows, but I guess I'm not. It's kind of sad, because I always thought I was an anime fan. I guess I actually don't care that much. I mean, mainly because, like, Hunter x Hunter has not had a ton of different openings. I feel like they've only really had one. Am I crazy? Yeah, okay. Yeah, exactly. They only have one. So it's like, you can't. I'm not, I guess. I don't want to guess. Bluebird. That doesn't read like Bluebird to me, Tojo. Do you mind sharing your Photoshop keyboard shortcuts? So I switched from Clip Studio Paint to Photoshop, and I would love to know your keyboard shortcuts for the program. So I primarily use the remote for Wacom, for the Cintiq, because I only use certain keyboard shortcuts, and all of them, for the most part, I've mapped to the remote. So B for brush, right? I have, I think, one set to flipping, so Control H, which I don't think is standard. Then I have Z for the zoom tool, for scrubby zoom, that is standard. E for eraser. I have Control Z, Control D. I think I have one for rotating the canvas, which is, I have Control R. And then I have one which is transform tool, which is Control T. Other ones that I use, lasso tool, which is L. Control Alt I, which I believe is image size. Yeah. Control E, which will merge with the layer underneath it or merge a group. I have Control R for rulers, that's standard. Do I use anything else? Sometimes I'll set a keyboard shortcut for, where is it? Select, if I select something. Select, modify, expand. I will sometimes have a keyboard shortcut for expanding. Because, it's really helpful to have, oh, it's rotate R, okay, so R. It's helpful when I'm trying to, what is it, paint bucket tool something and fill in a certain area. If you select the empty spot, like if you were to base color in Photoshop, you get, if you had like a shape, you fill it, you get this kind of like weird line because it's anti-aliasing. So what I do is I will select it and then I'll go to modify, expand to like 6 pixels, double click with the fill tool, and then I fill it. So that's, sometimes I'll have that. Keyboard shortcuts for, so brush is B, eraser is E, lasso is L, flip horizontal I have set to Control H. Brush size increase, brush size decrease, or both, I think. With default with Photoshop is the bracket tools, or the bracket symbol, so it's like the symbols next to, I think, the letter P if you have like a normal QWERTY keyboard. I don't know where it is elsewhere. So for like increase, decrease are the bracket symbols. Switch background and foreground color is X. So if you hit X, it'll switch between background and foreground. Did you have to make character sheets when you drew characters of Interlunium, or was that someone else's responsibility? I did pretty much all the character work for Interlunium myself. Momoki had designs that she had come up with prior, but I didn't necessarily have to make character sheets. I did have to occasionally make sheets for when we were picking costumes for certain designs, but character work was all done by me. So that should be it for this one. And then we'll do one more. I've always used like hotkeys and stuff when it's like attached to the tablet. So with my Intuos, I always use the keys on the side. With the Cintiq, I've always used the remote. I don't like reaching around to grab the keyboard. I've just kind of always preferred to have it on my tablet in some way. So yeah. Looking at the reference. Oh, there's a lot of references in this one. Okay. Sean, thank you for the raid. I hope your stream went well. Peach. I will pet Peach. Yeah, my stream's going fine. It's been a pretty quiet day, which is nice. Miss Peach, someone asked me to pet you. That's what I'm gonna do. Is it weird? Peach is a cat, yes. Is it weird that I like how my cat smells? Cause like she smells like my house. I don't know. I remember I always associated my old cat, Tommy, with home. And so like, do I give Peach treats? I don't, because she's chunky. But she occasionally gets chicken. It's weird because, like, I guess I always think animals should smell bad, but as for being a domesticated animal, she doesn't really have a reason to smell bad if she doesn't go outside. Oops. Yeah, I mean, she'll eat anything that's chicken flavored. So I'm sure I could give her some, but... I was just having to stretch at work. Just like, no explanation, just having to get up in the middle of doing stuff. Hello? Why are you open? Bye, Sean. Thank you for dropping by and thank you for the raid. We have a good day. Hey, Steve. Joseph. Did they? There are a lot of different outfits that they came up with. Currently, no, I don't.
fight, you two. Whoa. Hey, hey.
Don't. Whoa. The cats are fighting. Are you enjoying nature? Do you have any go-to flowers you think of? Typical wildflowers. Daisies, sometimes tulips. Basically anything except for, like, roses. I hate drawing, painting, doing anything with roses. Roses are, like, my worst enemy. If I see a rose, I want to die. Like, I hate drawing roses. Everything else, though, is fair game. Peach fights? Yeah, she sometimes has some fighting hands. Sometimes she'll take a swipe, sometimes my roommate's cat will take a swipe, so, like, it's a little bit of a Cold War situation in the house right now. They are always on the cusp of fighting, and I think as a form of copium, I guess, my roommate and I are like, oh, look, they're, like, learning to, you know, like, if they don't fight, we're like, oh, they're, like, getting better. They're not. They won't. They will never. I've just never understood how roses work, and every time I draw them, they just look like very terrible peonies. So anytime I have to draw roses, I cry a little bit. Diana, thank you for the tier 1 sub. I really appreciate it. I mean, I struggle with a lot of stuff, but roses I've consistently struggled with my whole life. I've never been able to draw roses. Is my touch on? Oh, it was. I really dislike any touch thing for tablets. It's the worst. Because I think one of the Princefox ones is in the normal folder, not the Malaria Consortium one, so just letting you know in case you can't find it. I think the first one is in the other folder. You. Okay, so I was originally just going to finish this one, but if any of you guys have questions, we could do that real quick before I end for today. If anyone had any questions that they wanted answered, wanted to ask me anything, we could do that real quick before I end stream for today, since it's 10 p.m. June 3rd, I don't think anything's happening then, so for the most part, if nothing else happens in the coming week, we'll probably have a stream next Friday as well. Any tutorial class coming up besides class 1-1? No. I don't really have the time right now to be making a class, and honestly I didn't have a time at the point that I was making that class to make the class 1-1 course anyway, so I'm kind of taking an indefinite break from doing anything like educational beyond just the streams themselves. So if you come to the stream and you have a question, you can always ask me. I try to give as complete of an answer as I can while also drawing and talking at the same time. And that's what the streams are generally for. People come and ask questions, but I'm probably not going to do any kind of like art educational stuff for quite a while. Oh wait. Yeah. But I always appreciate whenever people ask, because it means a lot that they would want to learn from me, I guess. It's just those take a really long time to make. Wait, does this have... Okay, I'll set this up. Do I ever do critiques during streams? Currently no, because critiques tend to take over the stream. So in the future, when I'm all done with like these charity commissions and stuff, I would like to do dedicated stream critiques. So, you know, people will get to submit. We might make it sub only, just to limit the amount of things that I have to critique during that stream. If we're gonna do critiques, we'll have a dedicated stream for it, so that I won't feel rushed to do critiques and also still like get stuff done. But yeah, currently we don't do any critiques. I mean, there's a lot of people that kind of just ask questions, but and then never talk ever again. But hello, welcome. Yeah, the streams that I run typically are open forum for anyone who wants to like discuss anything art related. I am mainly an art channel, so very rarely does anything else happen. We don't really talk, I guess, generally about many other things except for art. So if you have an art question, feel free to ask. There's also people here that will give their 2 cents as well. But yeah, let me know if there's anything that people want to ask. But if not, that's totally fine as well. We can also just, you know, end for the night and see what happens in the coming week, whether or not I have the time to stream more than one day, or if Friday streams will even happen. I think it will. I think we'll be fine. But yeah. Yeah, that's another thing, like figuring out how we're gonna plan for those as well. I imagine what we could do is like have a form, a Google form, and then like if we're gonna plan for a critique stream, we have that Google form like linked below in like the Discord or maybe underneath the stream, and just be like, hey, fill out this form if you want to get your stuff critiqued on this day, and we just take away the link when we're not doing any critique stuff. There's also just submitting it to the Discord, there's putting it in like a Google Drive folder, like there's a lot of stuff. I also don't know how many people would be interested. I think quite a few. I get that question a lot, so I imagine it'll be a little bit of a wrangling kind of situation where we have to figure out the kind of best way to do it. But it's definitely on the docket for things I'd like to do in the future. So if you're interested in that, I would suggest sticking around for whenever I decide to do critiques again. But okay, cool. If no one has any questions, oh, how can I improve my line art? So I get this question sometimes, and I have different answers every time. But generally with line art, there's a couple things that you have to keep in mind with line quality, which is there's a time component. Just having experience and times put into drawing in general will help you kind of smooth out some of the little bit of inconsistencies with your line art. There is no replacement for experience and time, and so if you are struggling with line quality and line art, that's one thing, right? Another thing is to speed. Sometimes the speed at which you draw a line will affect the kind of feeling, will affect the quality of it, will affect like the texture and the sort of energy that the line has. Drawing super slowly will always create kind of a much like more thicker, consistent line, right? So like for example, if you draw like a shape really slowly, you kind of have a lot more of a, you know, classic just like straight, equal width, like all of those things, but it feels like it's really stiff and loses a lot of energy. The faster you draw something, right, the faster your lines are, the kind of more like slightly energetic, slightly more I guess just kind of in a loose sense, a little bit more movement with lines that are drawn quicker. But quicker lines, faster speed when you're drawing your lines means it's a lot harder to control for detailed stuff. It's a lot harder to create subtlety in it. Just as with slower lines, it's harder to imbue it with a sense of energy. It's harder to really give it that flow and that rhythm when you're very carefully trying to dictate every kind of like piece of it, right? So speed is one thing. Time is one thing. There's other things like thicknesses, so line thickness, line weight. There's kind of the texture, the brush that you use, the line quality. If you use a super texture brush or a super clean one, that'll also change it. How to improve all those things? First, I would recommend seeing whether or not you chicken scratch. So if you tend to find yourself doing something like this where you're constantly like putting down lines, even rehashing ones you've already done, I would recommend not doing that. I would recommend getting rid of that habit through really practicing like putting down a line and committing to it. Whether or not that means erasing it a little, like erasing parts of it and then redrawing half of it, but like still putting down a line and committing to it. You know, really trying to pull your lines through. That is a habit which will go a long way, both in a more like physical health for like part of it, as well as your line quality. Because generally with line art, right, we're trying to convey three-dimensional information with two-dimensional mediums. And a lot of lines and a lot of like overlapping lines will really hide what you're trying to say. So something that could have easily been done in, you know, one or two lines is being overdone and obfuscated and hidden with 15, 20, 50, 100 lines. So do yourself a favor and try to be a lot more obvious, a lot more definitive about the choices you make with your line art. And you'll see kind of an instant sort of kind of like new struggle, I guess. It'll feel very different if you haven't done it before. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to draw the right line the first time. It just means that every line you make, you're conscious and definitive about what it is, what the angle is like, how you're placing it, what is it for, what is it trying to describe. You're not using a ton of lines to describe one thing. You're using a singular line to describe one singular concept, whether or not that means an angle, a shape, whatever. You can redraw lines as often as you want, doesn't matter. The core of it, though, is that you're practicing that kind of confidence. You're practicing that level of definition. So if you're doing that, first thing to really figure out. Second thing, it depends on the style of the line art that you want, but you could look into whether or not you like styles that have a lot of not the right brush for that. If you like styles that have a lot of thick to thin, or if you prefer styles that are relatively consistent in width, right? This is gonna change depending on your tastes. Deciding which ones you prefer is going to help a lot in this case, because certain styles of line art will affect like the struggles that you have during it. I tend to not like super thick to thin lines. It's not my preferred go-to. I've worked with it before, but personally I think a much softer, less intense version of it is my preferred way to go about it. Some people don't want any change in line thickness. Deciding what is it that you want to do and figuring out kind of logistics of why would I make a thicker line here? Why would it be thinner here? Like, some people have thicker lines to indicate shadows, thinner lines to indicate areas in light, all those kinds of things. Picking or deciding what direction you want to go in will help you kind of center yourself in terms of what's my goal with my line art. What am I trying to accomplish visually, right? And like the last thing is basically kind of going along with confidence. It's knowing what you're drawing. It's knowing how and what it is that you're trying to draw, the object or the idea. The more you understand like the building blocks of what you're trying to draw, the less of a struggle you'll have trying to communicate that through your line work. So if you're just starting to draw or learn how to draw like the human body or the face or whatever, your line art's gonna suffer because of it. It's gonna be very obvious if you don't know your foundations. So a lot of different reasons why your line art might not be where you want it to be, but there are also a lot of different ways for it to get there. So analyze whether or not it's your like habits, right? Chicken scratching versus pulling your lines through. Whether or not it's a style thing, right? You kind of have a mixed match of stuff. Maybe your lines are a little too unsure for the style that you've picked. You kind of do a bunch of thicknesses all over the place and it just looks messy. And lastly, do you actually know how to draw the thing that you're trying to draw? Because line quality is like the icing, the little cherry on top, but the core of it still has to be, do you know how to draw the thing, the object, the person, the character? And any of those things falls apart slightly and your line quality will suffer, which is why people spend their whole life trying to improve it. So I'd say focus on what you can do, which is mainly your line art habits. And then evolve your style through the artists that you follow and the people that you look up to. Analyze and figure out what kind of line art style are you interested in, and then that will dictate sort of what your future tasks are really going to be, or what your future I guess like questions are going to have to be in order to improve upon that. But that is also me saying that without knowing what your line art looks like. So there you go. Hopefully that was helpful. Any other questions? While I take a sip of water. Let me see. I think I saved all these out. Okay. So I was wondering if you had any advice for people who struggle with conceptualizing aspects of drawing. Like, you know the components of the drawing, the topic. I've seen you want to portray, but you struggle with getting a sense for how to make a drawing out of those ideas into a solid concept for drawing. So I'd say, yeah, it is kind of a large question. I'd say ultimately all I can really respond, like the only way I can respond is you might be biting off more than you can chew in a lot of the things that you're trying to draw, right? It happens when we have these big ideas about what we want to do and then it just doesn't come out on paper. For that, I generally recommend start small. Start with things that you know how to do and then work your way out of that, right? It's like the process of starting out with a character. Most people just start with drawing eyes and then they go to the face, right? And then they start adding hair, they start adding accessories, then they start moving into drawing more than just the face, but they start drawing the bust, or they start drawing like, you know, arms and like waist up, and then they go to full body. Like, you work yourself up to the big ideas. So if you're struggling currently with putting all of that together and putting it out on paper, it could be that your ideas are a little too big and you don't know how to really communicate them yet. So start small. Start with stuff that you know how to put down, and then add things slowly as you work your way past that. Because for someone who has spent years kind of putting out big concepts with a bunch of different working parts, it's not that big of a deal when they have an idea. They're not gonna hesitate with it. But especially if you're just kind of starting to think about these more complex ideas, if you're not comfortable drawing all those pieces individually, it's going to be really difficult for you to put them together. So start small, start with each piece, and then figure out if there's some kind of like technical thing that you're missing, right? Figure out if there's some kind of thing that's holding you back, whether or not that's fear of going out of your comfort zone, whether or not that's kind of like the idea is not fully fleshed out, whether or not it means you know, you're just not very comfortable with what you're trying to draw, and work on all of those elements individually before you put them together. As an example, if you know of this artist, J.C. Leyendecker made a bunch of really lovely illustrations for a lot of different magazines. But if you look at his preparation work for all of those magazine illustrations, he always drew individual pieces. And actually, I'll just pull it up because I think it's pretty cool. He would always do preparation sketches for his bigger paintings. And when you look at them, he's really breaking down very specific pieces of a painting, right? He's breaking down what does a face specifically look like? Am I gonna do it in like a certain angle or whatnot? All these different attempts at understanding folds, all these different attempts at like looking at very specific places of like this kid being held by this mom, or grandma or whatever, and like this kid holding something. Like, what if the hand was in a different position? Like, he's breaking down all of these elements because he needs to do that in order to understand the bigger concept he's trying to do, which is ultimately these two people walking, right, with children. I don't necessarily know which painting this is for, but he did this a lot, and it just kind of made sense to him. And if this is something you need to do in order to kind of figure out how to communicate all your ideas, then this is just kind of something that you can pick up or learn to add to your repertoire of stuff, of things to do before a big painting or whatever. But the thing remains, like, if you struggle with kind of the more complex ideas and putting them down on paper, you're probably just not ready yet to put all those pieces together. And that's fine, right? It gets easier. The more you draw, the less intimidated you are by big, complex ideas and concepts. But your brain is usually often much further ahead than your hand. So give yourself time. You can work through it. It will ultimately get better, but you just kind of need to always be, you know, kind of punching the wall in this sense. You always want to be trying to break down the barriers for what you feel like is stopping you from really engaging and trying out these bigger ideas. And it might just be that you have to start on a much smaller scale and then work yourself up to it. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, of course. Always happy to answer questions. But yeah, okay. Thank you everyone for coming. I'll end the stream here. I think next Friday will be fine, so if you guys want to ask more questions and stuff, you can always come by then and ask me at that point. I always hope to see everyone again at the next stream. And yeah, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for always keeping me company. I very much appreciate that people come to these streams and they ask questions and they talk. It means a lot to me. Thank you for sticking around. I hope that this coming week is either peaceful or goes smoothly for all of you. Hope you get to do something you really like or eat some food that you really like. And hopefully I will see you all next week on Friday. And yeah, take care of yourselves. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend. If anyone's graduating, congratulations in advance. But yeah, take care of yourselves, stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you all next Friday.